All right, so welcome everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Like I said, I'm Dr. Diane Hayden, and welcome to the Path to Healing. We're talking today about longevity and biohacking, which I'm super excited about. I love hearing all like this new cutting edge therapies and things like that. And we've got a good, diverse group of panelists on with us today to talk about their modalities and things they've been studying and researching. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce each of them, and then they'll have a little chance to kind of, talk a little bit to you about what they do in their practice. And then, as I said before, if you guys have any questions, please go ahead and type your questions in the chat. And I've got a bunch of good questions for them as well. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Deanna Sharon. She found that the one-size-fits-all approach to treatment in conventional medicine often failed to adequately search for and address the underlying cause of symptoms in herself and her patients. For this reason, she chose to study and then establish her functional medicine practice, Natural Health and Healing. Dr. Sharon is certified in functional medicine from the Institute of Functional Medicine and has been practicing for over 18 years, and her website is www.naturalhealthandhealing.net, and she's gone ahead and put that in the chat. And then I have Michelle Boulay, CPA. She's the owner and co-founder of Imagine Float, a longevity-focused wellness center in Avon, Connecticut, offering science-backed, non-invasive services like float therapy, cryotherapy, Balancer Pro, Sculpt Neo, and the Biocharger. A former corporate finance leader turned wellness entrepreneur, Michelle blends analytical rigor with a deep personal passion for recovery, performance, and healthy aging. And she has helped over 8,000 clients optimize their health span and is committed to making cutting-edge holistic technology both approachable and effective. And you can find her at www.imaginefloat.com. I also have Dr. Julius Torelli. He's a cardiologist who transformed his practice over 4 decades into a holistic, prevention-focused approach to wellness. He integrates the non-physical dimensions of health into patient care, emphasizing personal responsibility and a mind-body approach to well-being. In 1999, he founded the Integrative Cardiology Center in North Carolina's Triad region, pioneering an integrative healthcare model. And he recently launched Gratefully Well, a digital platform for holistic health education. He's the author of Holistic Health Pathways, Awaken Vitality and Resilience with Intentional Gratitude, and the Gratefully Well Substack newsletter. And you can find him at www.gratefully.well.com. And Dr. Prasant Kankariam is a dynamic doctorpreneur and the visionary founder of 4 Elements Direct Primary Care and Wellness Space, where he's reimagining what healthcare can look like. Triple board certified in internal medicine, pediatrics, and obesity medicine, and holding a master's in health informatics and MBA, Dr. Kankarian brings together science, soul, and systems to craft truly personalized care, blending allopathic medicine with integrative functional, lifestyle, longevity, and precision medicine. Dr. Kankarian's approach is as holistic as it is human, and you can find him at www.4elementsmd.com. So welcome everybody. Thanks so much for being on our call today. I'm excited to talk to each of you and get all of your interesting takes on a lot of stuff we're going to talk about and the research that you've been doing. So I'll let you each just say hello, talk a little bit about your practice. So Dr. Sharon, just tell us a little bit about you.
Okay, so I have a functional medicine practice, as Diane mentioned, in West Hartford. I do telemedicine right now, so I spend a good part of the winter in Florida. And I found that that's been actually very well received by my patients. In fact, even when I come home, a lot of them still want to do telemed. And with functional medicine, a lot of what we do is testing to help us get at the underlying root sort of biochemical imbalances that are in the body. A lot of patients come to me and they say, nobody can find out what's going on. And when we do this deep dive with patients and they see things that are out of balance, it helps to for them to sort of verify and just help them feel like they're not crazy about how they're feeling. So yeah, so I guess that's all I'd have to say.
Awesome. Thank you. Michelle, how about you?
Hi. So owner of Imagine Float, we are a we have a whole host of non-invasive services that improve your lifestyle, right? So maybe you had a health hiccup, everything's fine, or so they say, but you don't quite feel like yourself. There's something just not quite right. Our services help you to kind of regain that glimpse of that former self. It's also, I like to call it proactive medicine, if you will. There are therapies that are non-invasive that allow you to prevent things from happening. So, they say a tight muscle leads to a torn muscle, right? So we want to get everything as well oiled as possible to improve that quality of life and that longevity.
Nice. Thank you. Dr. Torelli, how about you?
Thanks, Diane. Appreciate the opportunity. Um, my practice, as Diane said, traditionally trained as a cardiologist, and over what's now been 40 years, 39 actually. It's I started to notice that there are a lot of things in medicine that we do well, right? But there's a lot of things that we sort of kick a brick on. Most of those are the chronic illnesses, and we focus most of our attention, virtually 100% on the physical, right? So we ignore these what I call non-physical dimensions of health, things like mental health, emotional, behavioral, cultural health, spiritual health, and those are important. And then in addition, I also over that time found that a lot, as Deanna was sort of saying, a lot of people come in and they have physical complaints, sometimes debilitating complaints, and a lot of the time, probably the majority of the time, we didn't find anything physical. And again, we leave out some of these non-physical sort of dimensions of health that can be debilitating sometimes. And then over time, as I've aged out of practice. I'm probably the oldest one on the call here. I am now working toward taking all those things that I did face to face with patients and trying to transform that into a digital educational platform which I call Gratefully Well. Thank you.
Nice. I love it. Thanks. And Dr. Kinkarium, how about you?
Hello, good afternoon again, everyone. I think we can all agree that our primary care system in the US is completely broken. And, with 5-minute visits with your doctors, you can't even begin to talk about anything. So we have a membership-based primary care model, which is very affordable. And so it gives patients a chance to say, you know what, I don't have to worry about how much this visit's going to cost me. It's a flat monthly membership. They can text us, they can call us, they can email us. And it really, I think, is very relationship focused, right? Our very first visits are about you, your goals, your background, who makes you who you are, because what is personalized care if you don't get to know the person? And so it's really trying to say, how do we look at that person, their goals, and then put health in that perspective? So we do a lot of, yes, I'm an allopathically trained doc, but we'll blend philosophies. I think every philosophy has a place. And so you begin to figure out what the problem is and then say, all right, is this something that we have time for? Or is this something that we have to do right now? And so it's really sort of navigating that with our patients and giving them choice and the opportunity to discuss with their doctor how they want to see their health going forward. So super excited to be here and be a panelist with all you wonderful people.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah. I'm excited that we're seeing more and more MDs that are doing this because when I started the magazine back in 2007, Deanna, like you and, I mean, I knew Julius from years before, but I mean, there was like hardly anyone who's a medical doctor doing any kind of integrated functional medicine type of work. And so it's been awesome to see that grow and see that the industry kind of, take to this more and be offering what you guys are offering for patients. So I'm going to throw a question out. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff. We're going to talk about what affects longevity from a mindset perspective, from a nutrition perspective, from different therapies like cold exposure and all kinds of stuff like that. But I wanted to ask the four of you first, if you could only pick one thing that you were going to do that you think would really increase your lifespan enhance your longevity, all of that. If you had to pick one thing, what would that be?
Mm.
Yeah, anybody can go.
Um, I'd say sleep
Okay.
is
Why?
probably one of the most important things.
Yeah.
I think my answer would be really focusing on insulin resistance. I think it's a huge problem, and oftentimes it's detected way too late.
Mm. Mine would be stress management. Stress is the culprit for so many different things, physically, mentally, emotionally. And so if we can keep that in check, everything sort of falls into place from there.
Mhm.
I didn't know you were going to be asking the hard questions first, Diane.
Yes.
I don't remember that one being on the list.
It wasn't. It just came to me. And if that
I,
happens, I'll ask it.
I, I agree with what everyone has said, and I think insulin resistance which is basically inflammation, right? All the chronic conditions are inflammatory conditions, and it's such an issue that we don't address well in Western medicine because we just use pharmaceuticals, right? We don't really address lifestyle. For me, I think it would be mindset, or what you might call beliefs. I think we underestimate the power of mindset, and in general, but as since we're all physicians here speaking, or with regard to physical and mental health, I think we know about the placebo effect as an example, and we downplay that. When I first heard the placebo effect, I think I was 16 or 18 years old, and I was like, we need to try to amplify that instead in Western medicine it's kind of just a nuisance because we have to do these studies to prove our drugs work better than the sugar pill, right? Which means the sugar pill works.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love it. All right. Sleep, stress reduction, insulin resistance, and mindset. Those are all good. Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
I like asking that question because I think it's good to just hear your different viewpoints. Like, what if somebody, from a monetary perspective, could only do one thing,
Yeah.
or who knows? Like,
Mhm.
it's like I think we're going to talk about a lot of stuff, and that just popped in my mind. Like, if I was listening to this, I don't want people to get overwhelmed when we talk
Right.
about a lot of things we're going to talk about. So I think it's good to point out, like, what's one thing you can take away from this and focus on that.
Right.
So those are all good. And it's all individual, right? Like some people might have no problems with sleep. So they're going to look at something different like mindset or stress reduction. So, it's all good stuff. So I'm going to start with nutrition and diet. And so I'm going to throw these questions out and you guys can just jump in just like you just did whenever you have something that you want to contribute. So what are your thoughts on dietary interventions such as intermittent fasting and ketogenic diets that have been shown to enhance metabolic health, promote longevity because they influence the cellular pathway? They like what we just talked about, like insulin sensitivity and resistance. So what do you guys think about that? Because I know it's kind I feel like there's always some raging like fad diet going out there.
Yeah.
And I think it's, like, but there are things like intermittent fasting and ketogenic diets that, done the right way, I think can be very effective. But you guys might have different philosophies on that, or you might have something else that you want to throw out about your opinion on nutrition. So whoever wants to jump in.
I think nutrition is a hard one, right? Because I think there's so many factors at play, right? For example, what's available to you, what are your cultural backgrounds? Being vegetarian, for example, a ketogenic diet is much harder, potentially, right? And then you've got gut microbiome. So so much of this has to be individualized. But I'm a big proponent of intermittent fasting. I'm also a big proponent of the fasting mimicking diet. For those of you who haven't heard it, it's also really good way of trying to at least have some food while you're still activating those fasting pathways in your body. But I think so much of this has to be in the context of what someone's personal eating styles are, right? The worst thing you can do is give someone a diet and say, I recommend this, and that just doesn't work for their lifestyle or for their cultural backdrop. So I think while there's general principles that, I typically like to talk about a low glycemic Mediterranean style of eating, but I don't call it a diet. I think it's more of a style of eating. And there's a lot of good data. It's got to be nuanced to what that person is able to do and willing to do.
Can you explain what the mimicking is? Because some people might not know what that is.
Yeah, so I think, commercially it's available, but there's also alternative ways of doing it. It's basically you're giving your body a certain amount of macronutrients so that your body still thinks it's fasting, but you're able to sustain it over a period of time of 5 days or 7 days. And typically it's initially repeated in sort of a sequence of every month for 3 months or so, and then you do it every quarter. So it's basically tricking your body to say, hey, body, you're really fasting, but from a mind standpoint, it's like, oh, I'm actually still eating something that I don't feel like I'm depriving myself about. That's the best answer I have. I don't know, Michelle, if anyone else has another way of explaining an FMD.
So we don't offer nutrition here at Imagine Flow, and I am not a physician, but I can say from personal experience that I totally agree. It has to be personalized. You can't follow what's out there because every life stage you have or kind of what's going on in your life may work and may not work. So, as an example, intermittent fasting worked for almost my entire life. I was doing it naturally. But now that I'm in perimenopause, menopause, eh, my body does not like that at all. I have to be on a regimen of how I'm eating. And the things that I used to be able to eat that my body enjoyed and fueled no longer likes it. And so right now I'm in the realm of trying to figure out, well, what kind of fuel does my body need? And I think we can all agree that food is medicine. And when you do dial back your nutritional profile and find what works best for you, stick to it until it no longer works for you. But you'll find your energy levels improve, your sleep improves, your athleticism improves. All of the things that we call longevity will improve because you are giving your body what it needs to get through the day.
Love it.
I think we've learned so much. I go back, I remember my grandfather. So he died of a heart attack and was 66. He had high cholesterol. And in 1966, which, is a long time ago, but it's not, it's within some of our lifetime. And, they told him he came from a farm, grew up in Italy, and they grew olives and made olive oil. And so that's what they ate. And the doctors told him, no, you can't eat. That's terrible. You have to eat this stuff here called margarine, and that's all you can have. And
Oh no.
he died of a heart attack 2 years like after that, and he was miserable during that
I'm
time.
sorry.
Yeah,
I
it was
know.
horrible. But I think again
Yeah.
the thing that I'm hearing here, and I think that's as important is the that individualization is key. Back in the 90s, the low fat days, right, or the zero fat. I mean, there were literally nutritionists out there that said you should eat zero fat, and I was questioning them, saying, hey, I learned about this stuff called, essential fats in medical school. What about essential fats? Are they essential? And they're like, no, 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 just no fat at all, whatever. And again, I think, when I look at diets back then, we were recommending, right? It was kind of this just high carb, very low protein, very low fat diets. And, you used to see people sometimes who really followed it, their triglycerides would like spike way. I mean, from like 150 to like 400 sometimes. And you just, so I think but that individualization is very important. I think we're beginning to understand that. And
Mhm.
ultimately, it's all comes back to all the more natural stuff, right? It's all the synthetic stuff that really seems to be, whether it's synthetic margarine, and trans fats, or whether it's processed foods in general, all of that stuff seems to lead more to, the inflammation, as Vasant was really talking about, right? So it's really sort of that idea of, going around the edge of the grocery store and not avoiding the middle.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was going to say that I always say to my patients, if I could wave a magic wand over you, it would be that you would eat the food that's most health promoting to you. So food that comes directly from nature,
Mhm.
animals, plants, fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, whole grains, legumes. But I do agree. I mean, so much of it is individualized. And I love the intermittent fasting diet. I think it works for a lot of people. And it's just, the idea of having that time frame where you're not eating, where your cells can actually clean house. And that's really important for us. So I think that's been very beneficial for a lot of people. The ketogenic diet, I think is great for a lot of, for weight loss, for people who have Alzheimer's. I mean, our brain is more than 50% fat. Every nerve in our body is covered with a sheath called myelin made of fat. Every cell has a phospholipid membrane, so made from fat. So we can see the importance of fat to make all these structures in our body. And of course, the idea of healthy fats, not unhealthy fats, is really important in educating people on. But the ketogenic diet, I think to do it long term, I think it's great to jumpstart weight loss. I think it's probably something that's best cycled and not done continuously. And that cycle is different for every person, again, depending on their health goals. But yeah, I've seen people go on ketogenic diets and their, cholesterols and LDLs go through the roof. And, again, it's not that we're just looking at numbers, because there's, so much more than that, but it is really important to kind of look at each person and work with them on what they're looking to achieve for their health.
When you just
And if I may just,
yeah, go ahead, Vasant.
so if I may just add one more thing. So we have a hypnotherapist part of our practice, and she has a very interesting quote. To paraphrase, her name is Deb Macaron. She says, the most intimate relationship you have in this world is with your food, because unlike any other relationship, the food becomes a part of your being. So she says, when you look at food, do you ask yourself, are you worthy of becoming a part of me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love that.
I
Oh, I
love
love
that.
that.
I love that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's a great mindset shift right there, just for people, for sure. Yeah, I was just going to say, Deanna, when you outlined, like all the things that our body does with fat and needs fat for, isn't it crazy to think that there was a whole marketing campaign on no fat, low fat?
Yeah.
It's
It's
insane.
insane. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And the
And
worst part is they replaced all that fat with sugar.
Yeah.
Okay.
And sugar is the absolute ultimate culprit, right? So any nutritional advice anyone could get is cut out sugar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. That's a marketing thing right there. That's a whole other podcast that I'll go down a rabbit hole
Right.
with, about, whether these executives knew what they were doing, which I think they did. But we'll stop there. All right.
Well, there's
So go
there is
ahead.
a lot of influence from industry, right? And that's,
Yeah.
that's America, right? This is a capitalistic society. We love it, and it
Yeah.
works well for the most part. But in healthcare, I think you have to be careful with it. And I think, it goes back to, as Vasant was saying, we were, the system is broken. I sort of look at it as not so much necessarily broken, but it's certainly the problem with the healthcare system is it's an illness-based model. That's right. And so when you look at what we did in medical school, right, we didn't learn about prevention. In fact, we know very little about prevention outside of vaccines. There's not in the healthcare system. There's not a big market or financial reward for prevention. It's illness, right? That our society is set up that way. Doctors are trained in diagnosis. We spend probably 2/3 of our time about diagnosis and then treatment. And so, if you're looking for, healthcare and prevention and wellness, you really have to either go to a physician like is on this call, or go outside, like what Michelle has, go outside the healthcare system, to find that sort of stuff.
Yep, for sure. Okay, so have any of you used cold exposure, including practices like ice baths or hot and cold alternating or cryotherapy, and why? Michelle, I'll let you go first, because like this is your whole gig.
Exactly.
Um, one, we offer cryotherapy here, so I totally believe in that. But coincidentally, this past weekend I was up at Kripalu using a cold exposure retreat. So I did cold plunges all weekend long, even though it was 39 degrees. So yes, and then we also did sauna. Um, So big fan of contrast therapy, big fan of cold plunge, big fan of cryotherapy, but they're all for different reasons. So cryotherapy is a systemic response. While you're introducing a stressor for your mental tenacity, it's only 3 minutes. And you sort of acclimate to it really quickly. But what the body does is what's magic. That vasoconstriction, that blood going to your organs for protection, getting supercharged so that when you step out, your blood vessels vasodilate, that supercharged blood goes racing out to your extremities, promoting your natural healing process. I liken it to smoke and mirrors, just tricking your body into doing what it knows how to do. Whereas a cold plunge is really focusing on your breath work, really like focusing and getting into a place where you can withstand an external stressor. I said, one of the pillars that I would work on would be stress management. It doesn't mean you avoid stress at every turn. It's introducing a stressor in your life so that when something comes your way, you can say, hey, I've been here before. I know I can get through. That's management, right? So that's the beauty of doing a cold plunge. I'm a big fan of doing a cold plunge in Mother Nature in a safe environment with other people, not on your own. But just, there's so much to be said about just being one with nature as well. So
How long
really
is a
big
cold
fan.
plunge?
What, hun?
How long is a cold plunge?
It depends on you.
Okay.
And it's interesting because that came up this weekend at our seminar. And ultimately, it's a personal preference. When you say, I've had enough, it's enough.
Okay.
Don't try and say, well, Julius is going to be in there for 7 minutes. I'm going to be in there for 8. Well, now it's an ego trip. It's not,
Right.
this mental tenacity you're trying to accomplish. It's yourself. When you feel like you've pushed through, it's enough. And it doesn't have to be super cold. It can be in the 50s, it can be in the 60s, the water temperature. It's not about, putting yourself in danger. It literally is just about having it take your breath away and then finding a way to calibrate your breath. Once you get there, you're good.
Mm-hmm. And
I think
typically, when you alternate the hot and the cold,
Mhm.
how could just explain that a little bit for people?
Yeah, so you'll see this popping up everywhere now. It's super popular. You spend some time in the warm and then you go into the cold. Our mantra is always to end on the cold, leave invigorated. Um, but it's that contrast therapy between vasodilation and vasoconstriction of your blood vessels. Again, it's all just smoke and mirrors into tricking your body into healing itself.
And could somebody do it in the shower?
Yeah, cold showers all the time.
Right.
I think those are actually the hardest thing to do,
Yep.
because you're the one inflicting
Oh yeah,
that
I've done
cold
it.
on you.
My boyfriend thinks I'm
Uh,
insane, but I do it.
it's so
It
funny.
feels great if you can
It
get through it.
feels
Yeah.
great. Right. And, even, putting your hands into an ice bath. Some folks will kind of dunk their face into an ice bath. I don't know the word. You guys would know the word. On your hand, there's sensors. It begins with a G, glass, oh, something, but it's your thermoregulators. They reside on your hands, bottom of your feet, and just around your eyes. Um, so when you need to cool down, that handkerchief behind your neck is actually a misnomer. It should be your hands or your feet. So that's why you'll see a lot of people in the winter step outside barefoot in the snow. It's the same sort of trigger that's happening there.
Awesome.
I think an important thing you brought up, I think, is that breath work.
Mhm.
I remember back in 1994 when I was having all sorts of issues, mental health and physical issues, and I started to reach out outside the healthcare system to look for things, and I found this place. It was a yoga center, and they were doing breath work, and teaching breath work, and I was kind of like, what? Like,
Right.
don't we all know how to breathe? Like we're born knowing how to breathe, right? But I decided to do it anyway, and it was incredibly enlightening to me that I didn't know how to breathe, or I had forgotten how to breathe, maybe I should say, because I knew. And but then since that time, again, as we've looked at it, this breath work goes back to that, when you kind of call meditation, you can call stress reduction. I think all those things are sort of important, but that's another thing we don't talk about, and we're starting to understand the importance of it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I would just add that the key thing, obviously, about the cold therapies is just reducing inflammation, and how important that is, given so many of the environmental insults and lack of sleep and stress and all of the things that are just driving inflammation in our body. So I think on that note, it's very beneficial. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan personally. I'm trying to get myself, I mean, that's why I come to Florida in the winter, because I can't stand the cold. But
You know what though?
I
No one likes the cold. There's not one person who comes in here to do cryo who's like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to be cold. You just love the benefits.
yeah, so I think there's a way to kind of maybe acclimate yourself to it. And I kind of like the idea, Diane, of the shower and sort of working your way up, and you having control of that.
True.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
It's interesting, Deanna, because I know the shower. I like Michelle said, I find the shower harder because you're constantly getting this air movement across your skin with the cold, as opposed to being in a cold plunge where you kind of radiate this heat around you, and you keep it. So it's interesting. So if you're going to try the shower, if you could do the shower, the plunge might be a walk in the
Easier.
park. Correct.
I'll send you my technique, Deanna, and then we can do a polar bear plunge together. That's
Okay.
never
I
gonna
have my
happen.
own technique too in the shower, so we'll compare notes.
Okay, perfect. Awesome.
So,
All right, so we have talked so much about stress and mindset. This has come up, multiple times already. We're only halfway through this call. So I'm going to go to that question next. How does chronic stress and mindset influence aging and longevity? And what kinds of modalities do you all recommend? Things like meditation or mindfulness-based stress reduction, mindset exercises. Actually, before we do that, I'm going to tell a story because I think that this is I think it would be great for people to hear because it's a personal experience that I have literally just had related to a health issue and mindset. And so I've been over the last couple, well, throughout my life, I've had issues with heart palpitations, PVCs, tachycardia, things like that. I've gone through echoes and stress tests, and nobody can ever find anything wrong. So, they always boil it down to like, oh, it's in your head. Well, it might be in my head, but I can feel it when my heart is like pounding out of my chest for no reason. I don't feel like I'm stressed out or anything, or who knows, whatever. So, and over the last couple of years, it had gotten a lot worse, almost to the point where I was dealing with something daily, whether it was like tachycardia, I'd wake up in the middle of the night with it, or during the day, I would feel like my heart felt like it was hiccuping or skipping or two or three quick beats, and then it would go regular, but it was like a daily thing. So I tried all these different things, magnesium, different kinds of supplements, meditation, worked with a coach, like a stress reduction coach over it. And some things worked, and then it would kind of come back. And then over the last month, I've been working with both Deanna and Julius a lot on this. And so over the last month, I did a few different things. I changed the magnesium supplement to Julius. You can talk about it if you want to. I don't know. I don't know that much about it, but it was, I think, a more potent, let's
Bioavailable.
say. Yeah.
Bioavailable, yeah.
Changed the magnesium supplement. I started eating 100 grams of protein a day, which is almost my weight. And I've always been a big protein intaker, but I was never at that point. I'd usually be somewhere around 70 or 80 grams a day. Something just said, why don't you just bump up your protein, see what it does? I started really being careful about how long I went between meals. No longer than 3.5 to 4 hours between meals, and most of the time, like 3 hours between meals. So someone had said maybe it might be like a blood sugar issue, that you're having these palpitations. So I did that. My water intake's always really good. Um, Exercise, I didn't change anything with that. And the last so I'm texting all this stuff to Julius like literally 2 days ago. The last thing on my list that I said to him, sort of as a joke, but it's serious, was and I stopped freaking out about it. LOL. And he texts me back. My guess is that the last thing on your list is the reason why. Oh, and so what's happened over the last month is they've almost completely gone away. No tachycardia. Like I have felt maybe one or two, like, oh, I feel like it's did a couple quick beats or a hesitation or whatever. Maybe like once or twice in the last 4 weeks. So I'm telling him all this. Wow, I made all these changes. Look what's happened. He's like, yeah, my guess is the last thing on your list is what was the key factor that you stopped freaking out about it. I'm like, I did all this stuff, and you're telling me that that's all I had to like. No, easier said than done, right? That's all you had to do. I just stop freaking out about it, and it'll go away. So I think that story is pertinent to what we're going to talk about as far as the importance of stress reduction and mindset, and just like the more it happened to me, the more I thought about it until it was like a daily thing, and I'm like, oh my God, I felt something. Now I'm checking my pulse. What's it doing? Is it regular? Is it not? Like literally every single day I'm going through this, which then that makes it worse.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a lot of important things that I think that you brought up. First of all, I think, again, one of the things that I think is important is not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? So when you're having someone's having these kind of symptoms, getting your heart checked in the standard Western kind of way is important, because obviously, coronary disease is prevalent, and you want to make sure you don't have, something that needs to be taken care of. It's really a physical sort of, issue, whatever. But then if you find nothing, right, physical, and everything looks normal, then you can start to sort of look at this other stuff. The issue with the supplements is, this is the issue with all supplements, is just bioavailability, right? So there's a lot of studies that are done with magnesium in atrial fibrillation and PVCs and things like that. And they're always negative studies, but they're always using, magnesium supplements that aren't very, very bioavailable. And again, there's a very poor understanding, I think, in Western medicine, the traditional sort of medicine, on, the bioavailability of supplements. I think, all calcium is calcium, and we know it's not. So I think that's an issue. I try to avoid the word stress, because stress means different things to different people and different parts of our society, right? So stress to, an individual means one thing, different individuals mean something else. To an engineer, stress means something different. To a physicist, it means something different. But I think it's more, that's why I use the term emotional issues as opposed to stress. Because it may not necessarily be a stress that you're feeling, hey, I'm stressed at work and I get migraine headaches. Okay, well, that's be related. But it might be a subconscious thing. When interesting, Vasant brought up that, they have a hypnotherapist. Some of these subconscious sort of issues, whatever, I think people are having that need some kind of mental health sort of therapy as well, because again, it's just not dealing with stress is good. Breath work, mindfulness, all of that, mindfulness-based stress reduction, very important, I think, and very useful. But at the end of the day, it's not simple. It's not easy to get to. And as physicians in allopathic training, we don't understand that at all.
I think one of the challenges, right, if we look at a lot of these different mindfulness modalities, it's so much of it is body scanning, right? It's feel the subtleties of your body. But I think there's also something to be said about the exact opposite, right? For example, if someone's got chronic pain, how do you tell your mind to say, you know what, you're getting this signal, but I'm choosing to block it right now because I don't want it to affect my quality of life, right? So when you have these palpitations or stressors, to say, It's there, but I'm not letting it consume my mental bandwidth. And I think that's where something like hypnosis is really interesting, because you begin to, I think so much of this is, yes, we need to be aware of our body signals, but we also need to have the ability to turn it off, to say, yeah, I've got this pain here. I acknowledge it, nothing dangerous, but now I'm not going to let it come in the way of my day-to-day functioning. And I don't think there's a lot of emphasis in tools on developing that side of our mind-body connection, of saying, I see this, I recognize it, but I'm putting it away for now.
Mm.
That was exactly what I worked on with that coach. That was exactly what like kind of the steps she took me through, was basically like, okay, when this happens, you recognize it and maybe you give it a name like, oh, that's just my heart likes to dance. So that's just my heart dancing today. Like make it, I hate to say make it fun. That's what she said to me. It's not fun when you're living with this, believe me. Like I'm not trying to minimize it for anyone who has gone through this. That worked for me. That worked for me to get out of my head of worrying about every time I felt something. Oh my God, what's it doing? What's it going to do next? Am I going to have to go to the hospital? Blah, blah, blah. Like, okay, just recognize this is what it does. It's not going to overtake my life.
Right.
That was important.
It's a great point. Is one of the things I've realized over the years is that perception is a choice, and it's really important. In fact, that my next issue of my newsletter that's coming out at the end of the week is exactly on that, reinterpreting stress or perceiving stress as in a different way. And there's now studies that actually show that it's not the stress that's the killer, it's the way you perceive the stress. So if you look at something, I'm going to go give this talk, because everyone has, the biggest fear is giving, public speaking. And I'm going to go give this talk. I'm nervous, I'm stressed, or whatever, when you perceive it that way. But those are the same bodily reaction that you have, let's say, when you're excited, right? Or you're energized, you hit the same sort of thing. And so if you just perceive it differently, um, again, it sort of goes back to that mindset. Especially once you know that you got checked out, everything's okay, right? Then you're in that place where you can then decide how you're going to perceive it, or even, like I said, sort of ignore it, right? It's there, but it's not causing you any problems. And then it's like a thought, right? And then those thoughts, you don't have to believe everything that you think, right? Those thoughts will just go away.
Mhm.
Any other practices that you guys recommend?
Well, I was going to just bring up, so I've done Dr. Joe Dispenza's work for 2.5 years now. Diane and I have gone to a week-long retreat, and it was just so transformative for me. I really was living in a state of just constant reactivity, high beta, just, react to everything in my life. And for years, I was searching for something that would help me be able to hit the pause button and respond instead of react. And when I went to his retreat, that is where I think basically that week away from my environment, and then also just being in a space where you're learning meditations, you're guided through these meditations. And it really did bring my nervous system back into balance, and really allowed me to be in that place of being able to respond rather than react. And, as you're talking about, Julian, with our thoughts, I mean, our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors really create our personality, and our personality creates our personal reality. And we know that thoughts basically can affect genetic expression, just like the food we eat, how we sleep, how we manage stress, the personal care products, chemicals and things we're related to our environment or exposed to in our environment. So we actually have a lot more control over our health than we're led to believe, in terms of, the way conventional medicine approaches it. So I think being able to, I know a practice that really helped me was called the STOP tool, and learned from Dr. Joe's work. And basically, anytime I would start to have a thought or a feeling or start to behave in a certain familiar way that I knew wasn't loving to me and wasn't really serving me and my body and my health, I would just say stop. And it's really the idea of, starting to interrupt those neural networks. And I would have a different thought or say something positive, just to, again, sort of rewire the brain with different patterns, because we become so programmed that, we're basically just on automatic pilot. So if we can start to learn to recognize those thoughts, those feelings, those behaviors that really take us in a place of ill health, it really is, can be very transformative.
I think there's a lot of different tools. You've got some of your traditional Eastern medicine ones like acupuncture. I'm a huge believer of. I think it does wonders for people. There's been a lot of interesting data that, for example, irritable bowel syndrome, which we know there's a lot of mind-gut connection, that hypnosis is non-inferior to a lot of medications that are used for IBS management. So, I think there's a lot of people I think are hesitant to experience, right? So I think having these opportunities to say, let's talk about it, give it a try. It's not going to hurt you. But then I think there's more creative tools. So for example, I'm a huge fan of the Kumuso necklaces or bracelets. I don't know if you've heard about these, but they are pieces of jewelry that were inspired by the Kumuso monks of Japan that all have to do with breath work. So I have a lot of patients where I've recommended this necklace that they wear, and when they're getting stressed, they use that necklace as a tool. And the fact that it's physical gives them a sense of comfort, that it's a physical tool, which elongates their exhale, and that triggers that parasympathetic. So I'll put, I have a discount coupon that I'll put on the chat in case anyone is interested in it. But there's a lot of really cool tools around us. You just have to figure out, are you the type of person that can self-motivate yourself? Are you like, for example, like you, Diane, that might need a coach to say, I need someone to guide me? And some of this is just sort of having that conversation of saying, can I do it by myself, or do I need a tool? Does it need to be physical? Does it need to be a person? And customizing it to that.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think like what everyone's saying is that we don't have a toolbox, and we're not, we're in a society where we're not taught to build the toolbox, in that every situation is going to require a different tool. And it literally, it takes time and money to find them, to figure out what works best for you in a given circumstance. And that can be frustrating because we live in a society that it's fix me right now. Like, I don't want to take the time to figure this out, but we have to take a step back and say, okay, I tried this, it didn't work, but in the future, it might work for a different circumstance. So just kind of building those experiences, to your point, of trying these things out. And the biggest thing is knowing thyself, right? So again, just like nutrition, what may or may not work for me doesn't mean it won't work for someone else. Same thing with your tools, right? Acupuncture is a great modality. It works for certain things in my body. It doesn't work for other things. And so, but I know when to pull that tool. It's the biggest thing. And along the lines, I learned something really cool this weekend. I believe it's also Japanese, that if you hold one of your fingers and just breathe in and breathe out, this is an adult form of thumb sucking. And so when you're having a sort of I don't want to say a panic attack, anxiety, but your emotions are heightened for whatever reason, to just kind of take a step back, hold that finger, take a few breaths, and it could be any finger. It doesn't have to be your pointer. But it's free, it's available, and right, just a tool. And so talking amongst one another, saying, hey, normalize that conversation. What do you do when you're feeling a little, uncomfortable?
Yeah, I love that. Awesome.
Seems like we keep bringing up breath work a lot.
Yeah. Well, it's important, right?
I know, that's my point. It's like,
It's vital.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but yet in medical school we learned nothing about it. But
No,
Yeah.
I know. And it's funny because I always thought, oh, I breathe. And honestly, like when I was having a lot of those thoughts, I started to become conscious that I was holding my
holding
breath.
the breath, yes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's very, I mean, in this
Yeah.
country, we hold our breath a lot.
Actually, I just heard this thing this weekend too, email apnea. So it's when we're checking our email, I
Wow.
guess we all of a sudden hold our breath.
Wow.
And so everyone should have a post-it on their computer that says, like, are you breathing?
Crazy.
Isn't that fascinating?
That's
Like
really
that's
interesting.
yeah.
Not
And think about
surprising.
how long we spend searching through our emails. That's a lot of
A lot of
Not
apnea.
holding.
breathing.
The other thing I see as a primary care doctor, right, which is interesting, is a lot of my patients, I think one of the biggest issues we have is access to our physicians when we need them, right? And so for a lot of patients, I find that even just them knowing, like, hey, I know I can reach you, brings down their stress level. It's not like, you don't feel like you're
Mm.
floundering in the system by yourself, right? You don't know, you're not waiting for that heart attack to happen. And so it's really interesting that, the more I see these innovative delivery modalities, so much of this is I don't want to bother the doc, but I know they're there when I need them. And that is so reassuring in so many ways.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's a critically important point in just going back to the healthcare system, that one of the unfortunate things, if you look at sort of the evolution of the healthcare system in the US over the last, we'll call it 50 years, but really even more than that, is we've we've really decimated the physician-patient relationship, which in our society is a very important relationship, as Vasant was saying. And it's been decimated. It's really been destroyed because of all the things that we've allowed as physicians, we've allowed to happen. So we don't get to know the patients. And back again, I think 100 years ago when you had the country doctor, even though he didn't have near the tools we have today, the technology we have today is just unbelievable. But yet people, I think, are getting worse health care. And the reason is because that country doctor knew you. He knew you. He lived in the community. He knew your family. He knew the stresses you were at when you were having headaches. He knew that, I don't know, whatever, your husband was alcoholic, and was he was brought up that way. And he understood all those family dynamics. We don't know that stuff today, right?
Right.
And it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yep. All right. So we've got just a few minutes left for a couple questions. If anybody who's on the call has a question, go ahead and type that in the chat. And I'm going to ask you guys about genetic testing. So I bet people are thinking, like, should I go do this? There's all these genetic tests out there right now, right? And like, I think there's even some tests that you can check to see how long your telomeres are, which are predictors of longevity. What are you guys' thoughts on that? Like, some of them are very expensive, some not. Do you think that it's something we should do, or should we really just focus on all of the techniques and strategies and things that we talked about today?
I think there's certain tests that, so number one, the caveat is you need someone to interpret that data for you, right? So if you're going and shopping for these tests and you get this report back, what are you going to do with that information? So I think, first of all, I would always say, if you're going to do it, have a conversation with your doctor who's going to interpret that for you, because they need to know what guidance to give you. There's a lot of patients who I know who've gotten, done with a bunch of different companies, and they come with these these SNPs. And I think they're very interesting. I think a lot of them can give you guidance with what are you predisposed to, right? And then the question is, what are you going to change based on that predisposition? So I'm a huge fan of genetic testing. There's certain ones I like, certain ones I don't like. But I think at the end of the day, it's really about, does the person on the other end know what to do with that information? Because there's no point in paying $500 and going to a doctor, especially in the traditional world, and you're saying, here, I got this done, doc, tell me what to do. And they're like, yeah, I got no idea, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's a waste of money.
Right.
So, but I think for the right person, it can be a very powerful, motivating tool. Now, the question, I think kind of what Julia said is it placebo or is it not? I find that a lot of times the data may not directly correlate with a change in clinical outcome directly, but having the data may influence the behavior, and the behavior change is probably going to be the most important thing, right? The vast majority of the health outcomes are determined by individual behavior. So it can be a tool for that for the right person.
Yep. Makes total sense.
And
Yeah, I agree.
I do a lot of,
No, go ahead. I was going to say, if it's going to change the behavior, I think that, and that's the inspiration that you need, then by all means, I think do it. Yeah.
I do functional genomic analysis with a lot of my patients. And basically, if we understand that genes code for enzymes and enzymes run every metabolic process in our bodies, um, knowing where you have genetic weaknesses in those metabolic processes can sometimes be very enlightening. So with what I do, it's not about saying you have X% risk of this disease or that disease. It's really about understanding. I give a simple example. There's a gene that converts beta carotene from sweet potatoes, squash, et cetera, into vitamin A. And so if you have genetic variants on that, you may not be able to convert beta carotene into vitamin A. And so knowing that information, we might want to support you with vitamin A supplementation. It's a very simple example, but so it allows us to really look at how prone are you to producing free radicals? How well are your detox pathways working? How well is your nutrient transfer and absorption in the body? So it gives us a lot of really great detail that I have found to be very instrumental in helping a lot of patients, get through some, challenging health issues.
Yeah, I agree with everyone. I think we don't do genetic testing, but I think testing in general, I always say data is queen. As long as you can interpret it and have an action plan in place to maybe reinforce the things that you're doing really well, or to talk about things maybe you're denying. So we do heart rate variability testing here at the center. And we've had lots of hard conversations with folks because they're denying themselves the permission to manage their stress. They, get caught up in the caregiver. And once they see the data that says, like, no, it's actually affecting you, and here's the data, it's mind-blowing. And then that then says to them, oh, I should change now. So, I'll always say, like, it's not enough for us to feel something because we'll deny it. But if the data says, well, now I have to do something about it. And so it's really important to have that testing available. But as equally, if not more important, what's the next step? You can't overnight change everything. So what are the incremental things we can do? I always talk about a triangle being upside down. We're focused on the bottom, and those are a lot of steps to take and implement. But if we turn our triangle upside down, you do one thing, master that and change that into lifestyle, and then you say, okay, now I'll take on two more things. So giving yourself a win. And then in the next month or so, we're going to also start introducing muscle testing. So making that more readily available. It's a non-invasive urine test that is, they've been able to identify biomarkers in your urine that determines the quality of your muscle and things that you can be doing. So to your point, Deanna, about the free radicals, your ATP. So, is your nutrition supporting your muscle mass and the health of that muscle? Is your recovery appropriate? So, all of us are aging and our muscle atrophies, but that's the biggest protection and longevity to our bones and our structure that we can ask for.
Awesome. I just want to also say something like so my dissertation was actually on glucose and insulin metabolism in a young versus elderly population. And my whole area was I was getting my doctorate in exercise physiology. So we put these people on a strength training program. They were, I think the youngest was probably late 60s, 70, and our oldest patient was 85, I think. And 3 times a week for, I believe, 12 weeks. And these people actually gained muscle. And I can tell you that I've seen it in myself as well. And actually, I might be crazy, but I have a scale that's a pretty high tech scale that tells me that in the last month, since I've been doing 100 grams of protein a day and I've been lifting 4 times a day religiously, I have increased my muscle mass. So it does, like, I know, there's all this literature out there. It's like, oh, as you age, you're going to lose muscle mass. Yes. But I don't think that's the be all end all. It doesn't have to be that way. I think that with the right nutrition, the right amount of protein, the right exercise, we can maintain it, if not increase it. And, our research showed that even in an 85-year-old person.
Yeah, for sure.
Great.
Yep. Awesome. Well, we are just a couple minutes after the hour. Everybody, the panelists have all put their contact information in the chat, and we've copied that. So we will go ahead and when we send out the recording for this, we'll get you guys all that information as well. So if you didn't have a chance to jot it down, it'll be in the email blast. I want to thank all of my panelists. You guys were amazing. This was a blast. Always fun
Thank you for
time.
having me. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
No, it's really great to hear everybody's just different takes on it. And, the whole thing today was basically mindset, right?
Mhm.
What's going on up here? For
Yep.
sure. For sure. Awesome. Well, thank you guys, and thanks
Thank
everybody
you.
for attending. We'll get
Nice
you
meeting everyone.
the recording next week. Hope everybody has a great rest of your day.